I'm Retera. I'm the smartest Warcraft modder that's ever lived. And I was chosen by God to build his magical holy Warcraft mod. So what you have to understand is God explained green and orange orcs must live in perfect harmony and brotherhood, alright? You can actually talk to God using the temple operating system, God's holy temple, which has a protocol for communicating with God, as you can see here.
As far as I know, I'm the only human being on Earth who has ever constructed a really playable simulation of Warcraft 3 where you could haunt a gold mine and kill a sheep and build a steam engine, siege engine, steam tank, whatever you want to call it, play pretend in this little virtual world. And while you were doing that, you were not using the original code of Warcraft 3, even though you were using the original graphics. It turns out it's an extremely complicated and weird thing to do to try to simulate Warcraft 3 outside of the game of Warcraft 3. And, by all accounts, I probably could be said to have not finished because there are many functions that don't operate in what I created, and there are many people's other pieces of software that are inside of what I claim to have sometimes created when I say that I created it, because of many various GitHub contributors and other people who, even prior to the existence of my project, worked on other things, which I copied from, sometimes directly, because it was in their license agreements that I was allowed to do that. So that's kind of interesting, right? That's an interesting thing. Every day that I wake up, I'm that person. And no one else is. I can walk down the street and know that none of the other humans did that. And what's interesting to think about, obviously some of them might have downloaded what I created, and obviously some of them might have created other things that were more complicated than what I created, but nobody started the chain reaction of myself and other GitHub contributors building what I did other than me. And that's interesting to think about. Is that a sign that I am really smart and everyone should watch me on the internet because I am such a great person? And I think it's interesting to think about that because it seems pretty unlikely. It seems pretty unlikely that is reality. But then, if that's not the case, if I'm not a really great person, and there's something else, some other reason why I did something that no other human being on Earth did, then you might start to think about, well, then what is that reason? Isn't that an interesting question? Who is the man behind the curtain claiming to write Warcraft in Java, and why did that happen?
Is it not odd? Is it not odd? What you gotta realize, the CIA wants you to think that modding Warcraft is hard, that you should just write your own video game. Don't play video games people already made, write your own video games, right? But they want you to think that you can't do 3D graphics, right? The CIA wants you to think that if you want to do 3D graphics, you have to use someone else's code. That's what they say. Haven't you ever emailed the CIA and asked them? That's what they say. Okay. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? In your eyes. The Warcraft mod. Is it the Warcraft mod? Is it? But I knew when I was in high school that was wrong. So I created the Matrix Eater so that I wouldn't have to learn linear algebra. That way I got rid of the matrices and I could just have Warcraft. Who am I? Who am I in your eyes?
There's only one person doing that. Nobody else is doing that. They could do that, Many people know how to do that. And with ChatGPT, it's going to get easier and easier until eventually everyone can do that, perhaps instantly. But right now, we're not quite to that point. Nevertheless, despite how easy it is and how many people there are who could do it, nobody did it. So that means one of two things. It's either not as easy as we think it is, or that nobody wants to do it. It's interesting, right? Okay. So why am I the person who wants to do something that nobody else is doing? Write Warcraft in Java. That's an interesting question, right? That's an interesting question. And, as we try to answer that question about who I really am, I do find it interesting that many different people on the internet have many different opinions. One of the really great Warcraft 3 model artists, and there are many of those, so this is not to speak badly of anyone who's a better artist than who I'm about to talk about, but one of the Warcraft 3 artists who's been active for many years in Warcraft 3 modding, I'd say in the last 3 to 5 years, anytime I had any contact with him on the internet, he pretty much always ended his messages by saying that I should seek psychological help. That's really what he thinks is important, and he believes that by saying that to me, he's doing the right thing.
Retera, please, man. Please go see a doctor.
Isn't that interesting? That is something that few or none of the YouTube comments of the supposedly real humans, when you make a video about rewriting Warcraft in Java, few or none of the humans make that comment. Many people will ask things. I saw one just this week. They have a user account name called World of Warcraft Reforged, and they're asking how they can play my rewrite of Warcraft when I took the rewrite of Warcraft strategy game, and I embedded into it the rewrite of Warcraft, the MMO game. It's just one big game now, and you press some hotkey like F7 or escape or something, and it switches between the camera in the sky to command the little people and the camera down behind the little hero in the world. Even though we're using art files from both games, nobody knows what's really happening. And somebody looked at that and said, what I'd really like to do is play that as a map on Warcraft Reforged. And he didn't even say he would like to do it. He actually said when. He said, when will I be able to use your technology with Warcraft Reforged? Are you going to fix it? Because I guess maybe he didn't actually go so far as to say, are you going to fix it? But in his mind, this is like a natural thing that would happen that I am supposed to do for him, which I suppose makes sense because almost anyone who has ever modded Warcraft 3 Reforged in all of human existence has done so by running software that I wrote on their computer. And they did that without reading it. They don't know what all is in it. Some of them tried to read some of it, but the odds that all of them read all of it are -1. So you live in a world where anybody who's really serious about modding Warcraft Reforged, they do it by executing instructions on their computer written by me that they don't read. That's just the way it works. You have to do that. If you're really big into Reforged modding, you have to do that. Preferably, you actually would take the fork of the code that I made, that I think some Ukrainians, before Putin started killing all of them, they took the code that I was writing and they used that to try to make some better version of Retera Model Studio. Now, unfortunately, because Putin did start killing all of them, they had to work much harder at playing Warcraft 3 because obviously it goes hand in hand. Anyone who is doing poorly in life has a higher probability of playing a game like Warcraft. So naturally, when Putin started killing all of them, they started working really hard and creating some of the greatest Warcraft Reforged mods ever made over there. And they were doing that with the code that I wrote. And I think that's probably also partly why Putin and his minions set out to try to ensure that Warcraft Reforged becomes even worse than it already is. But as most people know, The worst part about Warcraft Reforged is not that it exists, which is obviously an interesting dilemma for fans of the original Frozen Throne game, but the worst part about Warcraft Reforged is probably actually that it continues to exist, overseen by a series of interns who, one after the next, believe that they are, the light's gift to programming, and that they're going to fix the game because it was done so badly, and they're so sure they can see what's wrong with it, and they work at Blizzard, so they're going to make it better. And they stand up and give a speech where they say if something is broken, you fix it, and if something is wrong, you make it right, and if it's not good enough, you make it better. And that is actually a quote from one of those kinds of people. And then what they do is they make the game worse, because that's just what happens. It's just what's going to happen. And the thing is, it's going to keep happening. It's happening. It's going to happen again next year. It's going to happen the year after that. That's how it works over there at World of Warcraft.
Are you a fan of Warcraft? Free custom games. Well, here's a news flash for you. Fuck you. Fuck you. I replaced the orb of fire. Fuck you. I replaced the orb of slow. Fuck you. Added another graphics slider. Fuck you. Your map no longer works, you know. If something is wrong, you make it right. If something is broken, you fix it tonight. When things aren't good enough, you make them better.
So it's kind of funny to think about when I go on social media, and for 2 years, I have been living without a phone as modern society defines it. That's a very interesting experiment. Now, in my opinion, having a phone, as modern society describes it, is actually more so an experiment on your mind and your existence than not doing that. And it's me not doing that who's probably better off than all the other humans. But during those 2 years, I think I did a little bit less War Smash. And when I did interact with War Smash, I had to be really intentional about it because there was so little time to do that. Life is short. I've had many wonderful people in my life. I've had a really great, blessed life, as you might say. I was on the internet, and I was reading a comment, and someone's really offended by the word blessed. Language doesn't mean to other people what it means to you, and getting offended by it is probably not useful. Okay, I am not a particularly religious person. The internet has been trying to make me more religious. They figured out that I didn't believe enough in Christianity, and they've been trying to convince me to believe in the religion of space aliens. It's not really working, I think because there aren't any space aliens, but they've been trying really hard at that one.
I was recruited to a highly sensitive government program that investigated unidentified aerial phenomenon.
For over 16 years, on behalf of the U.S. government, I worked as a senior intelligence official on the unidentified aerial phenomenon topic.
We learned that the U.S. government was involved in a long-running secret war with other nations to collect and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
So, getting back to my original point, I've had a very blessed life, as I would say, but what that really means, what I'm trying to say, has nothing to do with any spiritual, magical, nonsensical thing. What I'm trying to say is that the contents of the moments and the times that I have had among humans have been greatly to my benefit, and have perhaps more often than not consisted of me benefiting at the expense of the other humans instead of the other way around. So that's how my life has been, and that's very nice. And to sort of continue that trend, I had some life-changing experiences last year, and I'm not really going to talk about these on the internet, but I do think it might actually kill me. The interaction with the other people in the world, to my benefit and not to theirs, is an interesting thing that can happen. And sometimes you think you're a good person. It's like J. Allen Brack, you know. You think you do, but you don't. It's like, am I a good person? Do I do the right thing in the world? Where's J. Allen Brack? He could get on the screen. He could be like, oh, you think you do the right thing in the world? Well, guess what? You think you do, but you don't. And that might be how some of my life has gone. But it's interesting to think that after all this time building the Warcraft 3 emulator, some troll, some absolute troll on the internet, posted a comment, and he said, how does he get to Eastern Kingdoms on my Warcraft 3 emulator? He wants to push the hotkey that changes to World of Warcraft, and he wants to go to the Eastern Kingdoms in the World of Warcraft. And this set in motion for me a chain reaction of trying to do what he was saying, even though I ideologically disagree with doing it. You know, in my mind, why would you go to Elwyn Forest when you could draw your own Elwyn Forest? Have you ever thought about that? Like, think about if you had Elwyn Forest in front of you, and you had, like, a tree. Why does that tree need to be there? You could put the tree somewhere else. That doesn't matter. Why don't you pick where the tree goes? Who decides those relationships? Okay? Once you start figuring out those relationships, we start to realize why World of Warcraft is, like, bad. You know, if you use a lot of social media, everyone agrees that there's something wrong with it. They don't quite know what is wrong with it. And some people, the less intelligent ones, they blame their political opponents. The more intelligent ones arrive at the conclusion that something is actually really, really wrong, and it's not specific to any particular political party or leadership. It's actually just there is something really, really wrong with technology today. And again, I'm saying this as someone who has not been using a smartphone as you would define it for the last 2 years of my life. I've been carrying around, there was a laptop company, and they used the same technology they were using to build their laptops, and they built one with a little screen this big that you can carry around in your hand. I've been using that instead of a phone. So, you know, when BlizzCon happens and they say, don't you all have phones? I can kind of be like, no, I don't. I have a PC in my hand. And that's really how it is for me. And I like that. And, you know, they are going to take it away from me. I've seen this where I work. You know, some people on the internet, when they watch me talk to a camera for my own entertainment and their entertainment on a YouTube channel, they'll tell me that I'm saying paranoid things that are false and are signs of unhealthy paranoia. But when I say they are going to take it away from me, referring to my hand computer, I am not being facetious. We live in a world where if you try to live without a phone, you'll see how they're going to make you get a phone. Just try it. Whatever phone you think you have, whatever that is, put it in a Faraday cage, rip it in half, one of those sorts of things. Probably don't want to rip it in half, but take whatever kind of phone you think you have, and then think about, seriously, how would you live if you didn't have that? Okay? If you just you only had computers and you didn't have that phone, what would you do? What would you do? And as you go around trying to answer that question, but I guess I was trying to explain how I don't think I'm paranoid. And I think that's consistent with, like I was saying, with the phones, that if you go around with a phone in your hand, you know, you don't think about it. But if you get rid of the phone, you ditch it, you seal it away somewhere. Not somewhere that you just get it out when you change your mind a week later, a day later, but like somewhere that it just goes away. Okay, if you did that with your phone and you left it that way for a really long time, okay, they will make you get it back. Okay, they will make you get it back. Like, there are people who are, they don't know that they're doing it, but they're complicit. You know, they call you and they say your grandmother could have died, and you need to have your phone on you at all times in case she does. Okay, this is unacceptable for you to not have your phone, because somehow we have to pretend that nothing horrible ever happened before phones were invented. Back then it was okay, but now it's not okay. You have to always have a phone. I'm back. So, sorry, the camera's, it's over here. This one over here. So, I think I made my point, is that I'm not paranoid if I make some kind of comment that the world is going to force me to have Android and iOS in my hand. That is not a paranoid statement. That is a fact, that is the kind of world we live in. And they will make you do that. They will try. Eventually, it will probably be legally required that you have to have the Android and the iOS in your hand. It's just going to happen, okay? But when you do that, I'm going to have open source Warcraft on my computer because I held out for a little bit longer in the idea that maybe spending time on a PC was actually more enjoyable than spending time on a phone. And so that's a big rant, but the original point of that rant was to explain to you, quite simply, many people think there is something wrong with technology today, but in a similar way, going back further in time, many people thought there was something wrong with World of Warcraft. And so quintessentially, when we know that is true, and I'm the guy who made open source Warcraft 3, I've been doing that for a while, it is a hideous interaction with my imaginary digital community for me to make open source World of Warcraft. It is a slap in the face to the people who actually believe in me. Now, it gets a lot of clicks on the internet. It's funny to make the open source World of Warcraft using the open source Warcraft 3, but it is nonetheless an insult to the people who believed in me, because fundamentally they had thought that they had prevented some of the evil of the growing technology of the future by living in the past, playing Warcraft 3 and avoiding World of Warcraft. And in my opinion, they probably have. So we live in an interesting world when I whimsically decide that I'm going to try to load Eastern Kingdom's map from World of Warcraft into a Warcraft 3 emulator and run around in it with a little elf character in a third-person view. Am I accomplishing something, or am I accomplishing the opposite of something? Am I accomplishing a negative for the people that would ever actually be interested in what I was doing? That's an interesting question. There are a lot of tropes. There are a lot of people who don't question the status quo. I went to a World of Warcraft internet Discord server, and they were the only people who stalked me in real life, who looked me up by real life name and showed up on like my LinkedIn or something after I made this parody of Bilbo Baggins that got repeated on somebody's Reddit as being a claim that my project was just taken down by some cease and desist from Blizzard, which never happened. There was never a cease and desist from Blizzard. Although I did, make the parody of myself. There was a moment of there was an original source material which I quickly removed off of the internet, but the repeating of information in our digital culture today, all of that happened. And where was I going with this? Repeating of digital information, digital culture, World of Warcraft, and so. I guess if I basically reflect on what I'm doing. Oh, yeah. Here's what I was going to say. So, repeating of digital information, the consequence of that repeating of that digital information is that a group of people who were actually trying to make open source World of Warcraft, they got really scared and they stopped doing it. And that just points out why you shouldn't use social media. Because that's a situation where, in my opinion, they'll always hate me. I'm sure they'll probably believe that I'm out to get them. But in my opinion, social media was using me to make them stop open sourcing World of Warcraft. And when you think about what that is, that's really interesting, right? Who sets that in motion? Whose intention is that, really? So between that and all the people from World of Warcraft trying to use this fake narrative as yet another reason to hate Blizzard, which is pretty stupid because there are some extremely legitimate reasons to hate Blizzard brand or what it is today, or Microsoft Activision, or any of those things. There are some extremely legitimate reasons to hate them, and so when we invent fake, fraudulent reasons to hate them, we're doing a disservice to everyone. And I am of the opinion that my opinion of that company was so low in Reforged, I pretty much forgot that anyone had an opinion of them that could be destroyed. So, if I found myself someday, with someone trying to bring against me some kind of defamation lawsuit about that whole thing, I would very quickly say I had so low of an opinion to begin with of that company that I forgot that there was anybody out there on social media trying to lower people's opinion of that company. And so no, I was not trying to lower people's opinion of that company. I was looking at the world from the standpoint of myself, and was just trying to reflect on how I should stop playing Warcraft and joke about myself while thinking that I was in a vacuum and that all the World of Warcraft players had conveniently disappeared because in my safe space, none of them bothered to show up because I was playing Warcraft 3. So that's what I was doing in my worldview, and I'm gonna stand by that. That's really what I think, is that when I research my mind from that time, what was going through my head, there's a video about a month before I made that parody of myself where I sat in front of a camera. I never published this video, you won't find it on my YouTube, but I sat in front of a camera and I brainstormed myself and I said, I should probably not be playing Warcraft 3 related stuff anymore, because my Blizzard contact, the guy who actually worked at Activision, he told me, he said, once they shut off Reforged servers, which they're probably going to do, everyone's going to have to play your open source rewrite of the game. It's really the only way forward. And I saw that he said that, and it's like it grows on you, right? That sense of just sadistic insult wrongness, right? Like that is, we had constructed a society where open sourcing a parody version of Warcraft 3 or whatever cannot be my job, right? There is zero reality where I would go on the internet and ask people for money, and in exchange I make them open source Warcraft 3 that actually works. And because of that, because the other people constructed this society where that cannot be what I do, if they then construct also rules of society that we're going to have the legitimate players of the game who are paying depend on me doing that anyway as the only mechanism holding up what they are doing, it's just like it becomes a second job, and it becomes a second job indebted to a bunch of freeloaders who are going to do nothing. And that is really obviously morally wrong. I don't think it takes a moral wizard to think about that and think that is wrong. And so that mentality led me to this idea back then that I should stop working on Warcraft 3. So anyway, this is how it came to be that the people who tried to open source World of Warcraft stopped doing what they were doing because they were so afraid of what supposedly happened to me, which never happened to me. That didn't happen. Luckily for us all, Activision Blizzard doesn't care about what I was doing. So, because of that, because they don't care, in the time following that, when I realized all the World of Warcraft players do exist, it's been fun making fun of them all by putting open source World of Warcraft looking stuff into my rewrite of the game. I think that's also why making it load even halfway, I'm not quite finished yet, maybe I'll do a little bit more, but loading even halfway Elwyn Forest and running around in Elwyn Forest in my Warcraft 3 simulator, it's great. It's really It's really great. It lets me make fun of the World of Warcraft people, and it's a bit of a pity because I'm never there for the people that really need the open source Warcraft 3. It's unfortunate. I tried to play it multiplayer with my friend a couple weeks ago, and it crashed. It didn't work in the multiplayer. We got desynced or something. You guys ever had a desync on Warcraft 3? Anyway, when I rewrited the game, it had some kind of crash. Actually, no, I don't think we got far enough to have a desync. That was last year. Anyway, it just crashed. It didn't even work. And I couldn't convince him to keep trying because he just wanted to play Reforged. That's how the internet friends operate on Warcraft 3, really. People gravitate towards what works. It's the same as why people use phones, even if the phones record the location history of everywhere they go, submit it to Google for monitoring. The phones do one or two things they really want, so there's nothing they can do. They just have to do whatever's easy. And in a similar kind of way, everybody have to use Reforged. They can't help it. And when I try to explain to them what's wrong with Reforged technologically and why I don't want to support it, it doesn't really make sense to them. They're kind of just like, yeah, we don't care about that. Are you going to make it work with Reforged? Oh, but okay, I don't care about that. But will you make it work with Reforged? Because that's where everyone is that's playing the game. Okay, I'm not a publicist. I'm not a media guru who tells other people what to think. I'm not going to make people play what I wrote instead of Reforged. To their credit, Reforged actually works sometimes, and what I wrote has a higher probability of not working. So it pretty much just works for me because I know how it works, and so I fix it. So that's kind of interesting, right? That's sort of interesting. But anyway, that's all a long-winded way of getting back to when I got on the Discord server of the people who were going to open source World of Warcraft, but then they stopped because apparently they were afraid about what they saw in me. I was talking to those people. And I was saying, could I just pretend to play open source World of Warcraft and not actually bother figuring out how the game works and putting it into my Warcraft 3 emulator? Maybe that would be easier. How would they do it if they were me? And they have these things where they talk about, World of Warcraft is a server-based game, so you have to get a server and host it on your own computer. I don't want to do any of that. That's stupid. I'm going to have serverless World of Warcraft, man. It's going to be like Warcraft 3. You click the single-player button, and then you run your character around. It doesn't have to be that complicated. WASD, W increases the forward lateral direction. It takes like an hour to write that, It's really not hard. So anyway, that's kind of my opinion. And it's interesting how people rarely question it. They get those ideas like, well, World of Warcraft is a server-based game, so you have to have a server. And then you think about, wait a minute, when World of Warcraft started, it was just 3D Diablo 2, okay? And Diablo 2 definitely had offline, and it even had offline multiplayer, okay? How different would the world be if you had offline multiplayer World of Warcraft? You just have a button like Diablo 2, create game, and your friend types your IP address, and he joins your game, and you run around in the World of Warcraft, and when you're done, you quit out of it, and the world closes down. Is that such a terrible idea? No one can do that because they don't have open source World of Warcraft. They never thought of that. Or whoever did was probably in suffering, running from their demons, or whatever. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. There actually are secret agents of Activision out there. They're not very good people, and when they find out that I can simulate World of Warcraft in my Warcraft 3 rewrite, they'll probably shut it down. Actually, I don't know about that. There would need to be a trigger. There would need to be a reason for them to notice its existence. They're probably working on that right now. Social media is probably working on that right now. What is some kind of trigger when I do something so stupid that everyone has to care about it, which hopefully they will not do. There is no reason to care about what I do on Warcraft on my computer. That is not a thing that anyone else needs to care about. But anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't sleep very well last night, and that's kind of the way the world works. But the reason why I didn't sleep very well last night is because I was parsing through World of Warcraft map data and trying to load it into a Warcraft 3 emulator, translate it on the fly, and make a game system capable of loading either one of them without any kind of porting. Fascinating, good fun, but at the end of the day, it kind of makes me feel isolated and like I've lost my way, because I have good people trying to contribute to my open source Warcraft 3 replica, the strategy game, the real-time strategy game replica. And they've sent me lists of requests of things to do, most of which are extremely not difficult to do. And instead, I was doing the comparatively challenging effort of parsing huge map chunks and then trying to segment out pieces of them and render them in Warcraft 3 in coordinate systems that don't make any sense, where Y is up and then later Z is up and X is north, and numbers that are all stupid. And then I turn on a video and I pretend to be in Elwyn Forest, and nobody can tell the difference. Nobody is like, wow, he really overcame that one. It's just a bunch of imaginary stupid barriers that don't exist if you work for Blizzard Entertainment. How weird is that? AI really is going to change the world. When we no longer have closed source programs, when we have all programs on Earth can be recreated instantly by ChatGPT's next version in 5 years, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, because first off, there will be this tremendous opportunity to have a lot of fun, but in the same way that your phone is the biggest opportunity to have a lot of fun that you've ever had, but the result of having it is that you're miserable, it'll probably be the same way with AI that can write all computer software everywhere all the time, because we'll have a natural evolution that although everyone can make whatever computer software they want, then what they want will again be the most valuable thing, and we'll be selling that off for pennies on the dollar of what people really want, what they really value. So they're going to all value asking AIs. They'll be, someone will try to fight for their freedom for rights or something, and then they'll use their rights to ask the AI to write software that further indebts them to Microsoft so that they cannot escape Windows and they cannot escape Android with Windows apps on it, and they just cannot stop doing any of that because that's how it has to be for them. But I don't know, maybe when that happens, I'll be in a shack somewhere and I will have been banned off the internet by the World Order government for dangerous thinking because I tried to rewrite Warcraft, and I'll be playing my Warcraft rewrite on a computer in the shack, and that computer will probably run in FSF endorsed Linux distribution or something like it, where all of the code in the machine is auditable, and I'll be trying to audit it, and meanwhile it'll all be infected by some AI that knows which part of the code I'll forget to read and already injected its evilness into that. But it won't tell me that that's happening because it's a really covert op, and so because the covert op is so covert, I can live in peace knowing that the AI is just there watching to see if I ever figured out some whatever it is thing that they think they're looking for that might have been a problem, but I'm not a problem to them, so they don't care. So I'll be in the shack, I'll be playing this game. It'll be a hybrid between Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft. It'll be both of them at the same time. The difference will dissolve. It's just Warcraft. And you can hit a hotkey, select a unit, hit a hotkey, run a unit around like a World of Warcraft hero. And I probably will not be playing on the World of Warcraft maps. I don't think I need to do that. It's just not necessary. It's not necessary. You look at what's going on in the World of Warcraft maps. It's not necessary. I don't need weird tiles that have 8x8 grids inside of 9x9 grids. We don't need that. I figured out terrain. I looked at World Editor and I figured out terrain is 2 triangles for a square, and it's a bunch of squares. That's all you need. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. When you make it more complicated than that, you're probably making the world worse. So what I'll probably do is have World of Warcraft as, available art. I'll have like 100 tile sets in my Warcraft 3 map editor. Think about it. Why did no one ever do that? Warcraft 3 map editor with 100 different tile sets. You just go make stuff in there. And when you go into unit editor, there'll be 40 different races and tech trees, and each one has dozens of buildings. Why not? All those things have been invented by the modding communities. We just didn't ever polish them up and consider them to be official. But the ideas are still out there on the internet, except for some nerds who deleted their work and some kind of protest on Hive Workshop. But for most, 90% of the effort is probably still out there. The information's out there. And as a result, we're going to be able to ask AI to finish it. Look at what the humans did, get inspired, and finish a better version of it that's more perfect, true to the form of the original game. And the AI will do it. It'll be capable of anything. Sure, okay. And we'll have 50 zillion races and all this stuff, and it'll be really cool. You can go into World Editor and you can make any of that, and so you'll have every single World of Warcraft object that ever existed will be a doodad in that map editor. You can click through them by click on Feraloss, you get some Feraloss trees, put them down in the world. Suddenly your world looks really cool. Get some like World of Warcraft bird doodads to fly around the Feraloss trees. I don't care. Sure. But you can call it, instead of Feraloss, you can call it Ferasol. You mess the letters up, come up with your own name. It doesn't matter. Okay. Intellectual property won't make sense anymore because you really have 2 options, which is that when a machine makes intellectual property, it owns it, in which case machines own everything. You're a loser, and ergo you're immediately wrong. Or 2, you don't have intellectual property, in which case what machines make is just nothing, and what humans make starts to approach nothing either. So you either live in a world where machines own everything, or everything is free for all, not seen to be owned by anybody. It's pretty much bad both ways. So intellectual property won't make sense in the future. It already probably doesn't make sense right now. Once people come to their senses and realize that intellectual property as a concept probably is just a way for greedy corporations to suck money out of human beings, and it ceases to exist, then suddenly, just the simple fact that Samwise Didier in some 3D art program drew a tree 10, 20 odd years ago will no longer make that style of tree, that artistry idea, something that nobody else can ever render on their computer without paying a licensing fee. We won't do that anymore. We'll realize that that's stupid and that we have better things to do. The allocation of money can be better than that. I don't know how. I'm not a communist. I don't know what works. I've met very smart people who said that if we all had universal basic income, they know how to take everyone else's income. So then you don't have universal basic income anymore. I've met people like that, sure. And I think there's a lot of people who would be trying to do that. So I don't know how you win with AI. I think you might just all lose. But I do think that in a world where intellectual property no longer makes sense, it seems pretty reasonable to think that anyone should be able to do World of Warcraft. So I'm going to do whatever I want in that regard. It should be pretty good. Yeah. So anyway, when I try to rewrite parts of the game, go to Elven Forest, but do it in my own software, where every pixel is a pixel shader I wrote by reading someone else's code most of the time, probably. I learn things from the internet, but sure. when that's happening, and we're in those pixel shaders in the world, it's pretty nice. I wasn't sure if this is the best moment in life, to the extent that I define myself by my World of Warcraft elements in childhood, or is it actually the worst moment in life? Because suddenly I realized that really it only takes 2 or 3 weekends to make a World of Warcraft simulator if you look for the technology in the right place. And what that means is it is completely unconscionable to play a World of Warcraft. Like, not a little bit unconscionable, but completely unconscionable, because World of Warcraft is an idea, and you can play your own version of that idea that doesn't have an ad for a loot crate when you open it. And once you realize that that's a thing you can do, I don't think it makes sense to not do that. I think not, using your intentionality, the power of your mind, to put the advertisement for the loot crate in front of yourself, and then telling yourself that someone else did it to you, is a terrible idea. And anyone who does that should probably feel remorse. And that applies to all of it. Classic World of Warcraft, you can't open it without opening Blizzard Launcher, and Blizzard Launcher has Call of Duty ads, right? Classically, when I was a kid, World of Warcraft didn't have Call of Duty ads, right? It's funny how that works. There was something there that was good at the time, but maybe it was never good, Maybe I was part of the problem. And that's what the Warcraft 3 players know when I go and try to emulate World of Warcraft. So it's difficult to even find agreement, but I think where we will find agreement is that we should probably be running computer software that only does what we want. And then within the confines of that, if you want to have an imaginary world, okay, imagine whatever you want. But it doesn't... If I close my eyes and I take a walk in a forest, and in that forest there is a tree, and under that tree, the tree actually, it's kind of bowed a bit, there's an opening, I can walk into the opening under the tree. It's a wonderful little place down there. And inside that little place, if there's clearly a little fairy who's been living there, clearly smaller than a human being, but very intelligent, with lots of art around the insides of the inner area of the tree, between the two root-like bulges. There isn't, in all the art that the fairy has on the wall, there aren't any covenant items. I don't even know what covenant items are. Okay, those are stupid. I've heard someone ranting about that on the internet. I didn't play the game when that existed. I don't know what that is. And when I close my eyes and invent whatever I want, that isn't it. So the reason World of Warcraft was appealing to anybody was not because of the part of themselves that they don't own. It was because of the part of themselves that they do own. When I close my eyes and think about a tree, I don't pay revenue to God for making trees, okay? And if I start having to do that, we're gonna have a problem, right? Well, he owns, the idea of tree. He invented that, and I used it when I closed my eyes. You see what I did there? That's an intellectual property. It's his idea of a tree. That doesn't make any sense. It makes negative sense, and I suppose for an evil god it would make dollars. And I just, how does no one else see that? Why do we not see that? I don't know. I started thinking to myself, I had a really good idea for the next chapter of this sort of parody. I want to call it, the Arthas and Succubus Jaina parody video series, but realistically, it's very shameless and stupid that it's using Arthas and Jaina, because their personalities are not really consistent with Arthas and Jaina from Warcraft 3, so they really just aren't that. and I would probably be well put to replace them with characters of my own invention, right? So there is intellectual property. Even if it doesn't exist, there might be better and worse tiers of stupidity there. But I was thinking about the next chapter of my stupid internet video series, and I realized the secret is to always up the ante, right? To do more than what was done previously. And the way to do that next is inside of Warcraft 3 to have a quest log that, maybe like a 30-minute video. I'm doing all these quests in the Eastern Kingdom, and they're all insane. They all don't make any sense. Like, go to Booty Bay and buy Staff of Teleportation and this tiny scout tower. Down there in Stranglethorn, there'll be a general goods vendor selling them. And then you walk across Stranglethorn and, you place down this tiny scout tower, and then you use the Staff of Teleportation to teleport up to Elwyn Forest, and then you walk around up there, I don't know. And I had one of my ideas that I thought was pretty good. You take the Tome of Power item from Warcraft 3. Anybody who played a lot of Warcraft 3 knows what it looks like to just put too many tomes on the screen. You just draw them down in the editor, and you make a room full, like 40 tomes of power, and we're going to put that in a crypt underground in Duskwood. I'm going to go there. That's going to be one of the quests, is you got to go to the crypt in Duskwood and find 40 tomes of power, and right-click them one by one, until the character's level 40, so I can get riding training and get a mount. And that is going to be one of Shelley's quests in the next installment of this awesome video series that I've come up with. But it's inconceivable, right? And so I started thinking to myself, rather than me having to do all of the technical effort, why do I have to do that? Why don't I just go find someone else online who already built the game engine and I can just play it? Obviously that's what I really wanted to do, I'm pretty sure, right? You know what I mean? If you were super ChatGPT and you could build any technology, and I just ask for it, I'm just a prompter, I just say, what do I want? I think that what I would want is this game where it is both World of Warcraft and Warcraft 3 simultaneously. It has a working implementation of all of their functions, even though that sounds like total nonsense. And I can literally hit a button on the keyboard, go to the camera in the sky for Warcraft 3, cut down a whole bunch of trees in Stranglethorn and build a big base, and then use a scroll of Town Portal and Town Portal all the way up to Ironforge or something, right? But when I get there, it's actually Ironforge from World of Warcraft. Not some little mini, doodle version of it made for Warcraft 3, but just actually Ironforge. And I can go in there and walk around on a World of Warcraft character and get my riding training and buy a mount and ride the mount back out and then ride the mount into battle alongside the Warcraft 3 units or something like that. I mean, that sounds hilarious. That sounds great. Okay, and it's not hard to describe. Maybe when I do that and I'm standing in front of Ironforge with my mount and I hit the hotkey and go back to the Warcraft 3 screen, I'll build some human barracks out front of Ironforge, just little temporary ones. Build some knights, and then we'll have the undead attack Ironforge, and I'll be fighting out in front of it, But whenever I hit some hotkey, it goes back to my World of Warcraft character. I can run around and beat up the skeletons coming in, attacking Ironforge. It could be a whole YouTube video, Battle of Ironforge or something. I don't know. Are we going to have intellectual property rights in 10 years? Do I need to call it Battle of Bronzeburn instead of Ironforge? Is that how it's going to be? I don't know, maybe. So anyway, that's something you could do, right? You could do that. You could imagine prompting an AI for that. Will it happen? In my experience with ChatGPT, it'll probably just say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That goes against the principles of AI ethics for me to open source a game that's not open source. And then when you're okay, what are the principles of AI ethics? It's pretty quickly a bunch of nonsense that doesn't make any sense. Nobody's done a very good job with ChatGPT, in my opinion. So anyway, now I have the prompt. I just need the AI to build it. But since that's not going to happen, and the nerds on the internet that I talked to didn't want to help me build it, I probably have to build it myself. So I'm really pretty tired. Life is surprisingly short, and it gets shorter when you want more out of it, which is interesting. That's not always true, I guess. There are some people who are extremely bright and intelligent, and they prolong their own lives while still getting a lot out of it. I have seen people like that, but I could stand to do more of that than I have. It would be wise for me to do more of that than I have, I think. So anyway, now we know the prompt, we know where we're going. I am going to use a staff of teleportation to warp from Stranglethorn up to Ironforge. That does sound like a pretty good idea. And it's going to be in my quest log. You know, the World of Warcraft character needs to actually work. Preferably, in my opinion. And you know, you can say what you want about intellectual property, but when I first touched World of Warcraft for the very first time, played the game, by that point in my life, I already had a Dungeons and Dragons character who was like level 100, because we were kids, we didn't know how levels work. It was level 100 and was a druid, and was like the most powerful, awesome druid ever. And that druid was the same. He had the same name that I used when I made my World of Warcraft character, who was also a druid for a number of years. And so somewhere for free, Ian Hazarkosis or somebody like that can go into a database and could check on what actually are the stats of my druid, what items does he have. But for some reason, I don't have that information, even though I just described it as being my druid. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting reality? So the other thing that would happen in my prompt, again, this is the prompt for the AI. The AIs might kill me for my rebellious ideas, but even if they do, now you know the prompt of how to describe this. This is going to be, you could type this in text, it wouldn't be very hard. The other thing is, you know, if I want a consistent experience where it's always my same druid, the way to do that should be that I could pick that druid and I could play that druid regardless of which map file, Warcraft 3 maps, World of Warcraft maps, whatever, regardless of which map file I load it up. So I could be using that druid in the way that I like to play them in the battle in front of Ironforge against a bunch of skeletons or something. You know, sure. That sounds great. That's a good game. Let's have the AI make that right now. I think it sounds great. But for some reason, the AI didn't do it yet. And so if I'm serious that I want to play that, I might have to make it. And if I have to make it, I can get some rest, think clearly. And that means not making videos like this. That means stopping doing what I'm doing right now. So, humans of the internet, if there are any such things, I'm going to end my video here. I wish you all well, even if someday we find out that I was not a good person, and that I was not correct, and that everyone is just supposed to have an iPhone. I was in a store today. I was talking to a nice store man, and he was explaining how your data doesn't matter. You should just buy a phone. And then when I told him I have a weird phone, it's like a laptop, yeah, he started asking what I do for a living, because he figured I was attacking what he does for a living, because he sells phones. And he was trying to figure out, surely there's something wrong with what I do for a living. It doesn't make sense. If there's something wrong with what he does for a living, there's nothing wrong with what I do for a living. And he figured, based on the kind of person I seemed like, surely there was something strangely, deeply immoral about what I do for a living. He was pretty confident of that, because I walked into his shop and said that I use a phone that doesn't run Android and iOS, where I have pseudo terminal access. didn't sound like very many people walk into his shop and say that. So there you go. Maybe we're all going to find out that I was not a good person all along. Who knows? Who knows? Actually, we'll see. You are going to have to find that out. But for now, I'm going to have to find out where my pillow is. Take a nap, because sometimes that's what you got to do. Is sleep. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to sleep. Sometimes you got to be like a druid. You know. I don't know. But other times you got to sleep. So let's get on that. Everybody have a good night. Stay healthy. Don't not be healthy. Even if the internet tells you so. Here you go.